Before you know it, you're in over your head, caught up in something you never saw coming. January 28th, 1992. It's a quiet winter night in Waycross, Georgia.
Waycross, Georgia is a very small city. It's only about 13,000 people.
There's really not much to do there, so this opens the door for very, very heavy drug trafficking and other illegal activity.
Around midnight, 18-year-old Donnell Hammond is drifting off to sleep, but his night would soon be interrupted in the most terrifying of ways.
Donnell Hammond was asleep in his bed when he was awoken by a loud noise. And seconds later, gunshots. He goes in the living room to check on his mother, who is asleep on the couch.
Unfortunately, he found her in a puddle of blood in the living room.
It was a horrifying scene, just the absolute worst condition to find a loved one in.
Donnell's mother, 38-year-old Linda Gordon, is unresponsive and doesn't seem to be breathing.
Panicked, he dials 911 and begs police to get there.
Was this a random act of violence or a burglary gone wrong? As investigators begin looking into this harrowing case, they'll discover a twisted tale of loyalty and betrayal that caused one woman to flirt with danger.
She was completely out of her element with this man, and it ended up costing her everything.
Waycross native Pamela O'Hara always valued family.
I come from a big family. I had 7 brothers, and I had 5 sisters. I had a good childhood.
She was very sheltered. Her brothers and sisters were very protective of her.
Regardless, Pam became pregnant at age 15 by her high school sweetheart, Joseph Cooper.
I became a teenage mom real early. So teenager for me was playing mommy. I had my first kid at 15, my second one at 16.
After Pam and Joseph graduated high school, they decided to tie the knot. And soon, they got another surprise.
I had signed up for nursing school, RN and everything, and then I found out I was pregnant with Lexus, so I had to drop out.
But after 3 children and 13 years together, Pam and Joseph grew apart and decided to divorce.
There were things going on in the home that made the marriage difficult.
He was the madman ever since I knew him. I mean, we wasn't working out that well anyway. I married him for the wrong reasons.
I came home from school one day, and his bags was packed at the front door. And I asked her, what was that? And she said, it was your dad's bags. He got to go. I was so happy. I mean, I love my dad and my mom, but I never loved them together.
After her split with Joseph, the last thing on Pam's mind was dating. But one night in the summer of 1989 would change all that.
She still finds time to have fun, to go to the bar with her friends while her mother watches her children and gives her a break. So as Pam and her friends are enjoying themselves, a handsome man comes over.
He came over and he said, can I buy you a drink? And I told him, no, I already have one. And then he walked off.
Pam's friends were shocked. She turned him down.
They said, girl, you know who that is? Who that is? I say, no, who is it?
Her friend tells her that the man that just hit on her is the biggest drug dealer in town, Eugene Edmond.
Pamela didn't know who he was because she wasn't in the streets like that.
And I said, and what that mean to me? "You crazy. Why you ain't get the coke?" I say, "I don't do coke."
But Eugene was persistent.
When Pam and her friends returned to the bar the following weekend, Eugene was there again.
He came back and he said, "You should be with me." I say, "Why should I be with you? I have 2 teenagers and a baby." He said, "I like kids as long as they're not mine." And from that moment on, we started talking.
Pamela and Eugene are having fun. He really turning up the charm.
Something just clicked between them, and Pam finally started to feel an attraction for Eugene after turning him down a week before.
After that night, everything began moving in fast forward.
The pair embark on a whirlwind romance.
We started going out, and he just went and bought me a car for no reason, just because it wasn't my birthday, no holiday, or none of that. He just drew me into his world with the convenience of not worrying about things.
Eugene also took Pam's children under his wing, as if they were his own.
Eugene definitely took care of me and my mom and my sisters.
He was a father figure, and he's always teaching me something.
We had everything we wanted. And when he give me the money to pay our bills, I can go to my mom's, pick up her bills, and pay her bills when I pay mine. That attracted me to him a lot.
Pamela, coming out of this tumultuous marriage, now she's with somebody that's charming, somebody that's respecting her. Now, of course, he had his drugs on the side, but he was treating her like a queen. And who doesn't want to be treated like a queen?
Eugene even provided Pam and her kids with a brand new home.
He took me and bought all the furniture for the house. He was moving in with me and my 3 kids. He never had any drugs or anything in the house, so he kind of separated home from drug dealer, and I was okay with that.
She was very happy all the time. He did everything he was supposed to do as a man.
But underneath the happy exterior, a storm was brewing.
Pamela will eventually learn why it's important to listen to your head instead of your heart, and why it was dangerous to tie herself and her kids to Eugene Edmond.
In the summer of 1989, single mother Pamela O'Hara had fallen hard for Waycross, Georgia drug dealer Eugene Edmond.
Pamela O'Hara had just escaped a tumultuous marriage when she met the handsome, suave, and charismatic Eugene Edmond.
Eugene showers her with gifts and a new car. She was falling hard. She was head over heels.
But over time, Eugene's dangerous lifestyle began to seep its way into the lives of Pam and her children.
With his biological father out of the picture, Pamela's son, Sean, turns to Eugene as his male role model.
I started selling at 17 with Eugene Edmond. He was the man in Waycross, Georgia. I wanted to be like him.
He saw that Eugene was providing for his mother, he was protecting his mother, and he wanted to be a part of that. He felt like this is how a man should be.
When Pam found out, she confronted both of them.
My mom didn't really like me selling drugs, but she's going with the drug dealer. So I'm like, I feel like she couldn't really say nothing.
Eugene said, well, if Sean gonna be selling drugs, he may well work for me. I kept trying, Sean, you shouldn't be doing that. And he would still do it. So I feel like, well, if I'm with him, he get in trouble, he can get him out. That's the way I was thinking during the time.
Eugene promises Pam he will look out for Sean. In fact, he says he wants to be in her and her kids' lives forever.
Eugene surprised Pam with a marriage proposal.
But Pam doesn't have the reaction Eugene hoped for.
I say, why can't we just leave things the way they are? I mean, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. We good. He got a little offended about that. But I didn't want to marry him because I knew he was dealing.
Pamela is in love with Eugene, but she told him that he wasn't marriage material because of what he does for a living. She needed him to give up this other lifestyle.
But despite Pam's wishes, Eugene sticks to his ways. And she would soon be caught in the crossfire of his shady dealings.
He said, I want you to do me a favor. He said, I want you to go down to Miami and pick up a package for me from your cousin. So I'm thinking it's money. I say, she owe you? He said, yeah.
Pam thought it was a weird request, but she trusted Eugene and she was excited to see her cousin. So she followed through with his request. However, Pamela could have never imagined the trouble that it would get her in.
2 weeks later, on January 28, 1992, Waycross police have been called to the scene of a grisly crime.
They have just arrived at the home of Linda Gordon, who has been brutally murdered.
Linda was shot 5 times. She was pronounced dead at the scene.
As CSIs comb the scene for clues, detectives speak with Linda's son, Donnell Hammond, and what he says will give them their first big break in the case.
Donnell says he didn't see the killer, but he definitely has an idea who it could have been.
Donnell said that he had recently got on the bad side of a local drug dealer named Diamond. He admits that he robbed Diamond's house on a couple of occasions.
Now, Donnell wondered if Diamond had retaliated against him by killing his mother, and police were suspecting the same thing.
Diamond was by far no stranger to the Waycross police. They had in fact been investigating him for the last 4 years.
Diamond's real name was, in fact, Eugene Edmond. He was a ruthless drug dealer who didn't let anyone cross him.
Just 1 week earlier, Waycross police had attempted to set up a sting in the neighboring town of Jessup, Georgia, to nab Diamond once and for all.
They wanted to catch Diamond in the act, and this seemed like their chance.
There was an informant down in Miami who tipped them off.
The informant told them that one of Diamond's associates would be coming back from a drug run in Miami, and Diamond would be meeting them in Jessup.
On the day of the sting, cops surrounded the train station in unmarked cars, waiting for Diamond to arrive and pick up his partner with their stash.
Diamond was known to drive a number of different vehicles, and they were keeping an eye out for any of them.
When a silver sedan approaches, investigators perk up.
It matched the description of one of Diamond's many cars.
They can't see the driver, but they assume that it's Diamond.
Investigators see a woman approach the vehicle and put a suitcase in the trunk.
At that point, police exit their vehicles with guns drawn.
The police yelled for the woman and the driver to put their hands up.
But as the driver slowly inches his way out, it's not who investigators are expecting to see.
It wasn't Diamond behind the wheel. There was another young man.
In that moment, police were wondering what was the connection between these two individuals and Diamond.
What detectives would soon find out would not only blow the lid off of Diamond's drug operation, it would also be the key piece in solving Linda Gordon's murder as well.
Their number one suspect, Eugene Diamond Edmond, was also being investigated for his connection to a massive drug ring.
In fact, Waycross police had attempted to conduct a sting on Diamond just 1 week prior to Linda's murder.
Instead of catching Diamond in the act, they found 2 other individuals, a young man and a woman.
The man is 21-year-old Cedric Smith. The woman is 34-year-old Pamela O'Hara.
The police were clearly disappointed that the sting didn't go as planned. However, they refused to let these two off the hook.
Police asked Pamela and Cedric for their driver's licenses and registration for the vehicle.
He reached in my glove compartment to get my registration, and my gun popped out. And he backed up. I said, "Here, you can have it. It's legal." He said, "We got reason to believe that you got drugs." I said, "I don't have no drugs in my car."
But police soon discovered otherwise.
When the police searched the suitcase that Pam brought back from Miami, they found exactly what they were looking for. Wrapped up in a pair of jeans was a stash of cocaine.
He said, "What is this?" And he did like that. I said, "It looked like baby powder to me." He said, "That's coke."
To investigators, Pam seems bewildered by the drugs hidden in her suitcase.
She tells the investigators that the jeans aren't hers. She said they must belong to her cousin, who she's just returned from visiting Miami.
Pam thinks back to earlier that day, when she was preparing to leave her cousin Hattie's house.
Pam remembers before she went to leave, she had asked about the package that she was supposed to bring for Eugene.
Pam remembers Hattie telling her not to worry, that she would put the package in her suitcase for her.
That's when she must have snuck the jeans with cocaine into her bag.
And I stood there and I was just thinking, oh my God, no, she didn't. This is family. You setting me up?
Police confiscated the drugs, along with Pam's gun. But to her surprise, she and Cedric were let go with only a warning.
I believe they let me and Cedric go because we weren't who they wanted. They wanted Eugene.
Who the police truly want is the kingpin, so they think that if they let them go, that they would serve as bait to get the bigger fish eventually.
Back at the station, officers begin digging deeper into the backgrounds of Pamela O'Hara and Cedric Smith.
Cedric appeared to be Diamond's right-hand guy, and Pamela O'Hara was his girlfriend. Could these two be the key pieces in bringing down Diamond's drug empire once and for all?
Meanwhile, Pam had gone straight to Eugene to confront him about what happened.
Diamond's request is why she went to Miami in the first place. But now, it had almost gotten her arrested.
I said, "Why did you send me to pick up some drugs?" He said, "I wasn't gonna send you, but your cousin asked for you." I said, "Why would she ask for me?" He said, "I was gonna send Cedric, and she asked for you. So you send me to pick up drugs?"
Pam was furious that her man would put her in harm's way.
She's always said that she wanted nothing to do with the drug business, and he had just put her right in the line of fire.
Unbeknownst to Pam and Eugene, Pam's cousin Hattie had been working with authorities.
She had actually been busted for drug trafficking in Florida, and she cut a deal by setting up Diamond and Pamela.
But in that moment, Eugene tried to assure Pam that everything would be okay.
I said, "I'm finna get locked up. I got kids." She said, "No, you ain't never been in no trouble before. You ain't even got a traffic ticket. You won't get nothing but probation."
Pam has no idea just how wrong he was.
Her life was about to be turned upside down.
January 1992. Police in Waycross, Georgia, have been investigating drug kingpin Eugene Diamond Edmond for 4 years. But now, he's also implicated in the brutal murder of 38-year-old Linda Gordon.
After the murder of Linda Gordon and her son's statement implicating Diamond in the crime, they feel like they have what they need to arrest him.
Later that day, Diamond is arrested and brought in for questioning. But when they ask him about Linda's murder, he claims he wasn't involved.
Diamond admits that, yes, he did have an issue with Donnell, her son, but at no point did he ever threaten to kill nor have any intention on hurting his family.
Getting nowhere with Diamond, detectives feel like they're back at square one. But they do have another theory in their back pocket.
They think back to ℂ𝕧 Smith, who was Diamond's right-hand man.
They realized perhaps that Diamond used Cedric for his bidding, and maybe Cedric was the shooter.
Hours later, detectives bring in ℂ𝕧 Smith for questioning.
To their surprise, Cedric immediately caves. He admits that he is the one that shot and killed Linda Gordon.
But Cedric claims it was an accident.
According to Cedric, he went to the home to kill Donnell.
Linda started screaming, and it startled him.
He ended up shooting the wrong person. He panicked and then ran away from the house before the police could arrive.
According to Cedric, Diamond had ordered him to do it.
In fact, Cedric says Diamond let him borrow the car of his girlfriend, Pamela O'Hara, to commit the crime.
At this point, police are starting to believe that Pamela is more intertwined into the drug ring than she had let on when they first met her at the train station.
As police wrap up their interrogation of Cedric, Pam gets an unexpected call from the Waycross County Jail.
It's Diamond on the other end.
Diamond tells her that he's been arrested for the murder of the enemy's mother.
But Diamond assures Pam he's innocent.
He told Pam he never ordered Cedric to kill Donnell, let alone his mother.
And Pam believes him.
Diamond was capable of a lot of things, but I knew he didn't do that. Cedric jealous of Diamond and my son's relationship, and he wanted to be the top man up under him. He decided he gonna go take care for him. That was all on Cedric.
Diamond asks Pam for one more favor.
He tells her that he was arrested at a nearby hotel and that he needs her to go retrieve his things from the hotel room. He continues to reassure her that everything is gonna be okay.
He asked me to go to the motel to get all his stuff. So I went.
But Pam would soon find herself in police crosshairs again.
As Pam makes her way to the hotel, a swarm of police officers cave in on her.
They pulled me over and told me they was confiscating my vehicle. And I say, well, this is my vehicle. He said, no, it's our vehicle now.
Pam is then loaded into the squad car and taken to the station for questioning.
Detectives begin by questioning Pam about Linda Gordon's murder.
She tells the detective she knows nothing about it.
When police tell Pam they know Cedric used her car the night of the murder, she seems surprised.
Diamond had a way of switching cars with me, so he came and got my car and parked his car in my yard. I never knew Cedric used my car that night of the murder.
Not getting anywhere with Pam in regard to Linda's murder, detectives switch gears.
Then they start asking me about Diamond. Where did he get his drugs from? Who was his connection? I didn't know. I said, I don't know.
She swears that she did everything she could to stay clear of that part of his life.
They said, you're not gonna tell us anything. I say, I can't tell you something I don't know. I don't sell drugs. So they let me go.
But investigators continue to keep a close eye on Pam.
They tell her she's not allowed to leave Georgia while the investigation's ongoing.
The next day, Diamond had called me. And he said, Pam, you might need to take a vacation. I said, take a vacation? He said, yeah, you might need to get out of town.
Pam knows what Diamond is suggesting, but she can't bear to leave her children behind, especially her youngest daughter, Alexis.
I heard them arguing about her trying to take me with her somewhere. The next thing I remember after that is my mom coming in the room, and I could hear her sniffling like she had been crying. And she kissed me, and I pretend like I was asleep.
I just hated leaving her, but we were scared they was gonna lock me up.
Ultimately, Pam and her family decide it's the best option.
My mother and them took me to the bus station and put me on a bus to California, and I rode for 4 days. I decided to go to California because of my brother, Calvin. He was there.
Pamela moved to Sacramento in a hotel not far from her brother and his girlfriend.
But despite the distance she put between herself and her man, Pam wouldn't be able to hide from the consequences of his crimes for long.
They say, Pamela O'Hara from Waycross, Georgia. I said, yes. They said, we're here to arrest you.
February 1992. 34-year-old Pamela O'Hara has just fled to Sacramento, California, from her home in Waycross, Georgia. At the direction of her drug kingpin boyfriend, 𝕊𝕦𝕝𝕝.
She said that Eugene wants her to go out of town, but she wasn't going to tell me where. She said, take care of your sister until I come back.
Pamela is heartbroken to be separated from her children while she's in hiding. She makes daily calls to her mother's house where her 2 children are living while she's gone.
The police, everybody knew how I am about my kids. They know. The only way you could really, really hurt me is through my kids. I bounce back on anything else, but not them.
That spring, after about 1 week in hiding, Pam is dealt another blow.
Pam calls home and receives some shocking news. Her son, Sean, has been arrested. In fact, Diamond's entire crew has been arrested and charged. Pamela realizes that she can't go back home without getting arrested as well. So she starts making plans to start a life in Sacramento and to bring her daughter, Alexis, out with her as well.
She called me, and she told me she was going to come back and get me, and that she had already got me enrolled in school and we were going to move there.
She said, it's gonna be just me and you? I said, yeah, just me and you. And that never happened. It never did.
It wasn't long before Pamela's plans changed in the blink of an eye.
There's a booming noise at her hotel door. When she opens the door, she sees police officers.
They say, Pamela O'Hara from Waycross, Georgia. I said, yes. They said, we're here to arrest you. They sent us out here to get you. So I told him, I said, okay, hold up. I said, y'all take a seat. He said, what are you doing? I say, I'm going to jail anyway. I'm finna smoke this joint. So I sat there and I smoked the joint. And then they took me to Sacramento County Jailhouse.
The next morning, Pam is flown back to Georgia, where she sits down once again with Waycross police.
The authorities told her that it was her brother's girlfriend who gave away her location while she was in California.
Investigators grill Pam again about Diamond's drug network.
Pam insists yet again that she does not have any of this information.
But detectives don't believe her. She had been in a relationship with the city's biggest drug dealer for over 3 years. Her son was also a part of that enterprise, and she had drugs in her bags. She had to have known what was going on.
Not to mention, Pam had fled the state after authorities told her to stay in Georgia. That certainly didn't look good for her.
This time, cops throw the book at Pam.
Pamela is charged with possession with the intent to distribute cocaine, conspiracy, and the possession of a weapon during a trafficking offense. All the charges are connected to that one incident at the train station.
I was charged with that gun charge because, according to them, I had drugs and a gun in the same car.
There's a federal law called the RICO Act, which they set up in a way so that any criminal empire that you're connected to can get you pulled in to serious charges.
Pam is placed in the same facility as several other people connected to Diamond's empire.
The jail that they're being held in is a co-ed jail. So Diamond and Sean are both being held at the same location. Because Pamela is Sean's mother, they are able to visit.
When I saw him, it just tore my heart up.
I was very devastated behind it because she's really not a street lady. I was more worried about her than me.
After several months in jail, Pam gets an unexpected visitor.
Pamela is shocked when she walks into the room and sees Diamond waiting to speak with her. She knows right away that something is wrong.
Pam's instincts are right.
Diamond lets her know that he's going to testify against members of his crew. He was told that some were going to flip on him, so he cut a deal.
Pam is taken aback and feels betrayed. But her man assures her everything will be okay.
He told my mama, the only people I'm worried about is you and Sean. Tell Sean to tell his part, and they're gonna give you 10 years, and I can get you 5 years.
If Pamela takes the deal, she's only facing 4 to 5 years. However, if she goes to trial, she's facing 40 years to life.
I said, I'm not guilty, and I'm not gonna say I'm guilty. I'm not taking no plea bargain. So I refused it, and my son refused, and we went to trial.
Pam is eager to get on the stand and defend herself. But on the morning of trial, something happens that changes everything.
We were getting ready to go to court. Cedric, he said, Miss Pam, don't take the stand, cause I'm gonna have to bring Juanita in this if you do.
There are times where prosecutors will look at the lack of criminal history or criminal background when charging someone, as far as how long or how extensive are the sentencing and charges going to be. However, because this was such a huge criminal enterprise, it's not uncommon for prosecutors to overlook the fact that you don't have any type of criminal history and to charge you accordingly.
Pamela O'Hara's trial is about to begin. She's being charged with drug possession, conspiracy to distribute, and the possession of a weapon during a trafficking offense.
Her son, Sean, is also facing drug conspiracy charges.
Pam and Sean were being tried together, along with her drug kingpin boyfriend, Eugene Diamond Edmond, and Eugene's right-hand man, Cedric Smith. As Pam prepares to take the stand in her own defense, Cedric makes a shocking threat.
He tells Pam that he'll implicate her daughter Juanita as an accessory to the murder of Linda Gordon if her and her son take the stand.
He said, Miss Pam, don't take the stand, cause I'm gonna have to bring Juanita in this if you do. I said, what are you talking about? He said, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Miss Pam. I hate to do this to you. He said, I'm just trying to get home.
Pam and Sean knew about Cedric's involvement in the drug ring. Anything they said would just bolster the state's case against him.
Cedric wasn't willing to take a chance on what they had to say and was using Juanita as leverage.
I didn't know about Linda Gordon's murder, but the night that Cedric did it, he called me from the payphone around the corner and asked me could he come over. He needed to talk to me. So I was like, I gotta go to school in the morning. You can't come over here. So I didn't let him come. But a couple of days later, I found out that's what he did. He killed Linda Gordon.
He said he could bring Nita up in that murder. I didn't know if he could or not. I wasn't gonna take the chance.
He could have said anything, and I would have been gone too.
And I say, Sean, you can't get on that stand. I say, babe, we just gonna have to ride this out. He said, okay, Mom, we gonna ride it out together.
When I learned that Cedric was trying to involve my sister in that, I was devastated. It was like unbelievable. Cause we supposed to be so close. And why would you involve my sister? That didn't have nothing to do with anything.
When the trial begins, Pam and Sean listen as Diamond, Cedric, and others who were once close as family testify against them.
Eugene was always the one saying, don't nobody tell. So to see him get on the stand and actually testify and felt betrayed, I never in a million years thought he would testify against my mama, who was loyal to him like she was.
I wanted to get up there on that stand and kill him.
It doesn't take long for the jury to deliver a verdict.
Pamela O'Hara and Sean Cooper are both found guilty of all charges. Pamela O'Hara is sentenced to 40 years in prison. Sean Cooper is sentenced to 35 years.
As for Eugene Diamond Edmond, the drug charges against him are dropped for cooperating with authorities. But he and Cedric still have to answer for Linda Gordon's murder.
Diamond was convicted of malice murder for ordering a hit on Linda. He was sentenced to 50 years in prison.
For being the one who pulled the trigger for Linda's murder, Cedric Smith was sentenced to life in prison.
Him threatening Pam and Sean not to testify ended up getting him nowhere.
For Pam, prison is a tough adjustment.
To help her get through her depression while she was behind bars, Pamela turned to God.
You say, seek and you shall find, and I did. I was trying to figure out why I had to do all this time. Then I was getting ready to go to Bible study one day, and something say, tell your story. In my head, I said, well, I'm gonna tell my story. Then they say, write a book. And I'm answering, I don't know how to write a book. And they say, pick up pencil and paper, and I'll show you. And I started writing.
Pam makes a deal with her best friend in prison, Danielle Ferreira. When they get out, Danielle will help her publish her book.
I mean, I almost get a little teary-eyed because I remember sitting on that bench with her, and I'm like, you know, I said, this could be something big. We're sitting up there like children, dreaming.
And those dreams are what carried Pam through the rest of her prison sentence.
Pamela was released from prison in 2013. She had served 22 years.
In 2019, Pam's novel, Dark Justice, was published by Caged Bird Press. She hopes her story helps others to make better choices than she did.
I think it can show people that despite any bad choices you make, you know, things of beauty can come out of it.
Pamela believed in her man, and she never thought for 1 minute that he would betray her. In the end, Diamond was only concerned about Diamond.
Today, Pam is still working hard to rebuild her life and her relationship with her family.
Right now, I work at Walmart, jewelry, shoes, and apparel department. And I got half of 2 books I need to finish. All I want is simple things. It's all about family right now. I have 9 grandkids, 5 great-grands, and 1 on the way. And every time I see one of them think they're heading toward a drug dealer, I'm gonna pop them in the head. Off limits.
Playing fast and loose with love can end up biting you and poisoning your life until it comes to a screeching halt. But if you try to find the light, big city of New Orleans, Louisiana, teenager Antoinette Frank's daily life is as unpredictable as the southern wind.
Antoinette had a chaotic upbringing. Her father, he was a Vietnam vet, Due to that, he had some PTSD issues.
Get down, get down, get down!
Although he seeks treatment, Antoinette, her big brother, and their mom never know when he'll randomly wake screaming or become physically abusive for no reason.
Post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD as it's known, is a very serious psychological issue. The symptoms include nightmares, flashbacks, and sometimes violent outbursts.
She does her best to stay out of her father's way and under the radar.
Coming from that type of chaotic background, it's very difficult to develop healthy interpersonal relationships because they don't trust anybody.
Antoinette did not spend time with a whole lot of people. She was a relatively quiet kind of person.
All Antoinette can do is hope and pray that someday she'll find a way out of this nightmare. Then one afternoon at school, she learns about the New Orleans Police Department's youth program. The 16-year-old jumps at the chance to join.
And as we know with law enforcement, it is about rules and regulation and order. And therefore, by going into law enforcement, she can begin to get that structure that was missing in her early life.
The young teen falls in love with the idea of working as a cop.
She wanted to help and protect people because her life experience was so bad and negative.
She can't wait for the day she's old enough to serve and protect. Finally, at 22 years old, her big day arrives. Antoinette graduates the police academy. Officially a New Orleans police officer, she's assigned to one of the largest districts in New Orleans East. It's a dream come true, rescuing people in trouble.
She was a patrolman. She did not have a partner. She was in a car by herself.
Her only problem is paying the rent.
The police force didn't make a whole lot of money, so police officers would often do security details at restaurants.
And Antoinette's no different. Her part-time gig is at a Vietnamese place 2 miles from the department, owned by the 𝕬𝕜s, and she quickly becomes one of the family.
The 𝕬𝕜s were caring and giving, and they pretty much treated Antoinette the same way. And the restaurant was in need of security.
A lot of immigrant people don't trust banks, and so they pay everything in cash. So there was a good bit of cash at the restaurant.
For 2 years, the new recruit keeps her head down, focusing on her 2 jobs. Then, a chance meeting while on patrol changes her entire world. One day, Antoinette's dispatched to the hospital to get a statement from a man who was shot by an unknown gunman, Rogers Lacaze.
Can you tell me what happened?
But she soon learns that this is no ordinary victim.
Rogers was a straight up gangster. He wanted to lead the thug life, and that's the kind of life he led.
He was 18 at the time, and he was already involved in a lot of criminal activity in New Orleans. He was definitely involved in drugs.
Rogers had some history of arrests for assault.
But as the two talk, the normally tough-edged Rogers opens up to the pretty patrol officer. He tells her that he never graduated high school, lives with his older brother, and has no choice but to work the streets to get by. Antoinette can't help but feel bad for the teenager. She relates to his hard upbringing, and his story pulls at her heartstrings.
Antoinette seemed to develop a real interest in him. She may have seen this young man who obviously had somewhat of a troubled past, and she wanted to try and be a good influence on him.
He was a skinny, scrawny little guy, but she was attracted to him.
Days after their first meeting, she still can't get Rogers out of her mind. When he's released from the hospital, the young officer finds herself visiting him frequently.
Even though she knew it was wrong, she wanted to preserve the relationship. She was so enthralled with Rogers, so much under his spell.
As she falls for this suave criminal, her passion borders on obsession.
He's given her the attention that she wants, so she doesn't want to lose that, so she starts going along with anything he wants to do.
She was buying things for him. She did buy him clothes, and she bought him a cell phone.
He was riding around in her police car. He was going on calls with her.
If anyone questions his presence, Antoinette's quick with an answer.
She would introduce Rogers to people as a trainee. She also introduced him as her nephew.
Just my nephew.
She was in love with him. Now, Rogers, I think he may have just been using her so that he could basically do whatever he wanted in the city, and he had a police officer who was gonna have his back.
Now that she's got the badge and the man, life couldn't be better, until her boyfriend puts her loyalty to the test. A few months into her relationship with Rogers, after finishing her security detail at the 𝕊𝕦𝕝𝕝 Vietnamese restaurant, Antoinette heads to his apartment as usual. But when she gets there, she can see the teenager has something on his mind. He asks her how much money she thinks the 𝕊𝕦 family has.
Somehow, Rogers got it in his mind that the 𝕊𝕦s had money. And so he became obsessed with getting that money.
Rogers says he wants to rob the 𝕊𝕦's restaurant.
I think we should just go in there and rob the place.
What? But he'll need his girl by his side.
She's familiar with the restaurant and how it operates.
She knew, apparently, where the hiding place was for the cash.
As a police officer, Antoinette's conflicted by the mere thought of being involved in a crime. Her job is to protect and serve.
She had already put her career on the line, getting involved with someone who had a shady, perhaps a criminal past. But she also knew that he was going to commit this crime anyway, and so she wanted to perhaps not only save the relationship, but save him from going to jail.
Not ready to lose him, she makes a deadly decision.
Let's do it.
1 week after the young criminal convinces his cop girlfriend to help with the robbery, the unlikely pair put their plan in motion. Around midnight, the two head to the restaurant in her off-duty car. They grab a table to scope out the place. Working the night shift are 4 siblings from the 𝕊𝕦 family who own the restaurant. And tonight's security is being handled by a fellow off-duty police officer, 25-year-old Ronald Williams.
I don't think that he and Antoinette were ever partners, but they certainly knew each other from working details at the restaurant.
Rogers and Antoinette sat at the table for a while. They ordered.
She and Rogers started eating, but then Rogers did not like the food, and so they left. There were words exchanged about who was going to work the detail the next night, and Antoinette was told that her services were not needed, and she was not happy about that.
The couple takes off, and 5 minutes later, they pull right back up to the front of the restaurant. Armed with her service revolver, she slowly walks up to the door, while her boyfriend anxiously waits in the car with a 9mm. Peering through the glass, she watches as the 𝕊𝕦 siblings close up for the night.
The 2 older 𝕊𝕦s, they were in the front of the restaurant.
She spies the oldest sister, Khan, counting the money, while the other brother, Pin, talks with Officer Williams.
The 2 younger ones were already in the kitchen cleaning up.
17-year-old Quang and his 24-year-old sister, Ha, are completely unaware of the nightmare to come.
Antoinette was casing this restaurant and obviously was identifiable to the people who are inside.
Suddenly, Khan sees Officer Frank is back and gets a bad feeling. She grabs the cash and disappears into the kitchen.
She apparently sensed something was not right and didn't have time to hide the money anywhere but in the microwave. And it was about $10,000 in cash.
When she sees Khan take off, the crooked cop knows it's now or never.
Antoinette got into the restaurant. There's some conjecture that Antoinette had stolen keys to the restaurant.
Keeping her gun in her pocket, she rushes past Officer Williams and pushes Khan and Pin into the kitchen, where their younger siblings, Quang and Ha, are cleaning. Before Officer Williams can figure out what's going on, Rogers enters and points a 9mm at the back of his head.
That's when Rogers shot him through the neck.
Then the teenager fires 2 more times into his head and back. ending the young officer's life. As the shots ring out through the restaurant, Antoinette races towards the front to make sure her man is okay. Left alone, the younger Vus are confused as Khan and Pin immediately scatter, looking for a hiding place.
They became afraid after they heard a gunshot, and they went into a cooler in the back of the restaurant to hide.
When Antoinette sees that Rogers is good, the couple heads back to the kitchen and finds Khan and Pin are gone. So she rounds up the other two Vu siblings.
The younger brother and sister had no idea what was going on.
With no time to waste, Rogers starts ransacking the kitchen, looking everywhere for the cash.
Khan and Pin, they're waiting in the refrigerator compartment. They can see what's going on.
There was a window in the cooler, and they did observe Antoinette and Rogers, and they finally found the money.
That's when Antoinette turns her attention back to Ha and Kwang, who are trembling with fear.
The only thing she was thinking about is kind of make sure that Rogers was happy and that she was doing what she felt he wanted her to do.
Suddenly, from inside the cooler, Khan and Pin huddle in terror as they hear multiple gunshots.
They weren't there very long. This was quick. This was 4 minutes tops.
I got a plan. I'm gonna fix this.
Antoinette's survival instincts kick in. She tells her man not to worry, she'll take care of everything.
Antoinette was sworn as a police officer to protect her community. But instead, she was so devoted to her boyfriend, he was the only person that she wanted to protect.
She left the restaurant with Rogers and took him to Rogers' brother's house and dropped him off there.
Then Antoinette hears over the police scanner that the murders have been reported. Her mind spins, but she knows what she must do.
She went back to the scene, eliminate the remaining witnesses.
She pulls up to the restaurant. She's too late. Police are already on the scene. Inside the restaurant, the first responders discover the body of Officer Ronald Williams in the dining room. And in the kitchen, in a pool of blood, are Kwang and Ha Vu.
They had a wound in the back of their head, as well as, I think, 1 or 2 shots in their chest and abdomen. So it appears that they were shot execution style.
Antoinette boldly enters the grisly crime scene.
She wanted to make it look like that she heard the call over the radio and started asking what happened, what happened, what happened.
But she can't keep the charade going for very long. Khan Vu appears out of nowhere and blames Antoinette for the crime.
The girl looked at her and said, "You know what happened. You were there. You did this."
Khan speaks up to tell them that Antoinette was the actual perpetrator of the crimes. It's hard for the officers to believe that, to think that it was another officer that did this.
But with an eyewitness fingering their fellow officer as the perp, they have no choice. They arrest Antoinette for murder.
Are you okay? Are you hurt?
She was brought in for questioning, and that's how they came across Roger Lacaze's name.
Antoinette put it all on Rogers. She even said that her life was threatened if she didn't go along with this crime.
She admits being at the restaurant with Rogers when he suddenly started shooting and demanding money.
She went up to the 2 older Vus and wanted to talk to them, and then Rogers came in and did the shooting of the police officer. Then Rogers made her shoot the 2 other Vus. That's what her statement was. I did it, but Rogers made me do it. I was afraid that he was going to kill me.
Her fellow police officers are skeptical.
She had a .38 revolver with her. She could have shot him as she wanted to stop this carnage.
She's supposed to be sworn to protect the people. She's supposed to protect this restaurant.
Meanwhile, investigators track down Rogers at his brother's apartment and bring him in. The young criminal doesn't waste time. He throws his girl right under the bus.
Roger's story is basically that Antoinette killed him.
He blames her for the entire crime, and tells police that she was upset at Officer Williams for taking all of her shifts at the restaurant. So she went in and shot the place up.
At this point, love was thrown out the window. It was about self-preservation. They knew that they couldn't get out of it. They now were against one another.
But it doesn't matter who pulled the trigger. Investigators have enough to charge both Antoinette Frank and Rogers 𝕊𝕬𝕝 with 3 counts of first-degree murder. That summer, Rogers 𝕊𝕬𝕝 has his day in court and is found guilty as charged. He is sentenced to death. Antoinette Frank goes to trial 2 months later and is also found guilty. She receives the same fate.
They gave her the death sentence in under 40 minutes.
She has yet to show any remorse for her actions.
This person who is sworn to uphold the law has not only committed a robbery and murdered 2 innocent civilians, but also has murdered one of her fellow officers.
I don't think she would have committed a crime like this had she not met Rogers. She was easily influenced.
Antoinette Frank let blind love turn her from a protector into a killer. In Florida, Linda Pedroza decides her man trumps everything, even family. Growing up in sunny West Palm Beach, Florida, Linda Pedroza never had the chance to enjoy being a kid. Instead, the big-eyed little girl is forced to act as the glue that holds the marriage between her father, Andres, and her mother, Isabel, together.
There was quite a bit of conflict happening in the house between Isabel and Andres. Linda was their only child. Her father, Andres, was a long-time alcoholic. It caused real problems in the household.
Amid the chaos, little Linda tries her best to keep busy and bring some normalcy into her life.
She did everything she could to create harmony in the home. She would try to interject herself kind of as a peacemaker to kind of get her parents to stop fighting. And I think over time that began to wear on her.
By the time she reaches high school, the stress of trying to keep her dysfunctional family together causes her to completely unravel.
As she grew more independent, she rebelled. Her grades started to decline. She started acting out.
She would do everything her mom didn't want her to do. Drinking, smoking, dating.
When you grow up in a home where there is arguing and tension, the children that are part of that home become the collateral damage because they don't have the adequate role models to see what healthy relationships are about.
Linda eventually drops out of high school altogether. At just 16, despite her reckless behavior, she starts working at a restaurant in the mall. Even though her alcoholic father is hardly around, her mother makes it her mission to tame her wild daughter.
Isabel wanted to maintain some sort of control over the relationship between herself and Linda. And in doing so, she became very overbearing.
She was strict because she wanted her daughter to do right. She didn't want her dating. She wasn't allowed to have anyone over. She just would ground her, making her stay in the house or doing chores.
Just stay in your room. I don't want to hear about it. This is gonna go. This is horrible.
Her mother was very controlling, and the noose was so tight around Linda's life.
The only place the young teen is not under her mother's thumb is when she's at work. Enter 23-year-old Antoine Wright.
Linda met Antoine Wright at the fast food restaurant where she worked in the mall. She could sense that he was the bad boy. The attraction was immediate and it was strong.
Antoine, he had a workout type body. He had a strong physique and he was older.
Even though she's 6 years younger, he turns on his game and shows up to flirt with her every time she's at work.
Antoine certainly had a moxie about himself. Some people would refer to it as a swag, and it was something that was toxic. It was very attractive to Linda.
The two of them spend hours together after her shift, just talking. She confides in him about how harsh her mother is, and he opens up to her about his past.
Antoine had been released from prison 3 months prior for an aggravated battery with a gun.
But he downplays the charges.
I think his background didn't really mean much to her. If he was a criminal or not, I feel like that would have drawn her more to him, actually. I mean, she would have felt like, oh, he's a thug, so he can protect me.
And there's something else that draws her to this bad boy.
She knew that her mom would not approve of Antoine. So here is somebody that she could really, shall we say, stick it to her mom by dating. He definitely was someone that she would have been, shall we say, prone to gravitate to.
But for the next few months, Linda spends every moment she can with her new man on the sly.
Once she started dating Antoine, it was just them two all the time. I never, ever heard of anyone she used to hang out with after that.
She certainly saw him as a bad boy, and in some ways, the excitement of that might have been very attractive to her. But also, Antoine became a father figure who could give her that emotional support because she didn't have that in her life growing up.
Then one night, the lovers' relationship is revealed when Linda's mom comes home early from work and catches them in bed together.
Antoine was 23 years old, and Linda was a minor. She was only 17 years old, and that sent her through the roof. That was the straw that broke the camel's back.
Outraged, she threatens to call the police and press rape charges.
She said, if I catch you with him again, I'm going to have him put in jail.
To pacify her mom, Linda swears she'll stop seeing him.
I promise I won't see him anymore.
But the two lovers won't dare be apart.
They both decided to continue to see each other despite what Linda's mother wanted.
Just as Isabel has her hands full with her rebellious teenage daughter, one night Andres shows up demanding money.
He wanted to go out and drink, and he wanted his wife, Isabel, to give him the money. And she's like, no.
When he starts to get violent, Isabel decides enough is enough.
And she ended up calling the police, and he was arrested.
With her husband behind bars, a few days later, she returns her focus to Linda and learns some disturbing news. Antoine is still in the picture.
Neighbors or friends of her mom's would see her out and about, maybe drive by the house or something and see what's going on, and they would tell her mom.
She knew that Linda was lying to her. The relationship was really troubled. It really was, and it did not get any better. The more Linda's mother clamped down on her, the closer she got to Antoine.
Soon, Linda and Antoine grow tired of sneaking around.
They were committed. They loved each other. The only thing standing in the way was Isabel Pedroza.
One night, the forbidden couple are stealing some alone time while her mom is at work, when Antoine brings up a solution to their problem.
He said, yo, we gotta get rid of your mom. You know what I'm talking about. Because that's the only way we're gonna be together.
At first, Linda is stunned. She tells him to be patient. Soon she'll be 18 and they can run away together.
I'll be behind bars before you're 18.
But he insists that Isabel will only send the police after him and he'll end up back in prison.
Once he put in her mind that this is the plan, this is going to be the course of action that we're going to take, she is going to simply follow that, no matter what.
The teen looks deep in her lover's eyes and agrees to help him kill her mother.
Linda had never been in a relationship like this before, and she was really afraid of losing him. And even though she perceived her mother as keeping them apart, I believe that was part of the fuel to now add to this forbidden love.
Together, the couple comes up with what they believe is a foolproof way to get away with murder. 2 weeks later, the young lovers pick a hot summer night to do the deed. While at Linda's house, they anxiously wait for her mother to come home from work. Around 9 p.m., her car pulls up.
And when she got home, they were ready for her. Linda was waiting in the living room, and Antoine was in the bedroom hiding with a frying pan. When her mom made her way to the bedroom, she walked into an ambush.
She came in, he hit her so hard on the back of her head that the handle popped off of the frying pan.
Pan did not totally incapacitate her, And actually what Isabel tried to do was run back toward the door to flee. Antoine then grabbed her, threw her to the ground, held her down.
At her boyfriend's command, Linda slides an extension cord out of Antoine's pocket and nervously slips it around her mother's neck.
Antoine took one end, Linda took the other end. They wrapped it around the mother and they pulled it tight.
For her to get strangled while she's looking at her daughter and her daughter just watching her die, it's got to be a feeling of betrayal, sadness.
After just a few moments, Isabel takes her last breath.
I cannot imagine what it was like in that room. I really can't.
One can only think that what was fueling that was the intense anger, perhaps even hatred that she had for her mother. At the same time, she was doing this for Antoine. She was completely under his spell.
Then they took the body to the bathroom, filled up the tub with water, and dunked her under the water to ensure that she was dead.
Once they feel confident she's no longer breathing, the young killers know they need to get rid of the body. And Linda already has that part all figured out. She tells Antoine she once heard about a body that was disposed of by being doused with acid, disintegrating completely.
I don't know where she got the idea from. She might have been watching a TV show or something.
The two head to the closest home improvement store.
They leave the body there in the bathroom, get in the car and get muriatic acid and take it back to the house and pour it on the mother. Well, first thing, they got the wrong kind of acid. That's acid for the pool. That's not going to do anything to human skin.
After an hour, they realize her body isn't going to dissolve fast enough. Antoine and Linda panic.
So then they're like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do with this body?
So then they take the body out of the tub with the extension cord still wrapped around Isabel's neck, place her in a tarp.
Antoine suggests dumping her in the woods where no one will find her, and he knows the perfect spot. They put her body in the trunk of Isabel's own vehicle, and the two drive to an isolated rural area 20 miles north of Palm Beach.
They pulled along the side of the roadway, and Antoine took the mother out of the car and carried her into the grassy area, I think about 50 or so feet, and dumped her.
They didn't even think to bury the body. In fact, they left a large necklace on Isabel's neck as well as the extension cord.
The partners in crime race back to clean up the house and get rid of any evidence.
The only thing that they were thinking about was the freedom that they had to love one another and to be with one another now that the single biggest obstruction was gone.
The first few days are almost like a dream for the young teen.
Linda's father was in jail at the time. Now the mother's dead, so they have the house to themselves. They were living it up.
They were having parties, drinking, and he actually moved into the house.
Linda and Antoine are celebrating the freedom that they now believe that they have, and now they feel even closer together that they've shared this very horrific experience.
Everything is going to plan until neighbors get curious about all the partying going down at the Pedroza house.
I'm sure a lot of neighbors were asking where her mom was and why he was living in the house. I'm sure they were curious.
But she figures out a solution for that, too. 3 days after the murder, Linda calls the police.
Linda filed a missing persons report with the police. She said that they had had an argument, they had had conflict.
We were arguing about me starting college in January, and then she brought up the subject of my dad and him being in jail, and she couldn't stand it anymore. And she's like, I'm just gonna leave.
She suggests to the officer that her mom may have flown to Texas to stay with family. Police leave to begin their search for Isabel. When almost a week goes by with no word from authorities, the pair is elated.
They thought they got off scot-free, and they were gonna live their life.
But then, a few days later, surveyors working along a wooded road make a gruesome discovery.
Because of the heat and the length of time the body's been out there, she was unidentifiable.
Since the body has no ID and is too decomposed to recognize, detectives scour all missing persons reports in the area and get a possible hit: Isabel Pedroza.
When Linda filed the missing report, she provided photos to the officers. In the pictures, her mother was wearing the same jewelry that her body was found with.
They officially confirm her identity through dental records. Antoine and Linda are shocked to hear on the news that the body's been found. The two immediately get their story straight, so when police come knocking, they're ready.
When they came to the house to tell Linda about how they found her mom's body, she put on the waterworks. Apparently, she was an Oscar-winning actress.
Linda acted very surprised to learn that her mother had been killed.
She agrees to let the detective briefly search the home for any clues to her mother's murderer, but nothing catches his eye.
The investigator was actually about to leave the home without a bit of suspicion when he heard a noise, and he said to Linda, "What was that?" And then out walks Antoine. And Antoine said, the landlord said it was okay that he stayed there with Linda while the mother was gone. And that was the first sort of that the investigator had.
The detective gets a strange vibe from Antoine, and Linda's boyfriend moving in while her mother is missing seems suspicious. He asks them to come down to the station for further questioning. Initially, the young lovers stay strong.
Neither one of them gave any indication of anything other than what Linda had said, which was her mother left for Texas following an argument. That was their story, and they stuck to it.
But after hours under the hot lights and learning of the horrific condition of her mother's body, Linda finally cracks.
I would imagine the pressure of what she had done and the fact that these investigators seemed to be moving closer and closer to the truth. She was under tremendous pressure. And then she unfolded her story of what happened on that fateful day.
But she has her own version of how it went down.
She blamed everything on Antoine. She said that Antoine was the mastermind, and basically that Antoine made her kill her mom.
Because he always kept telling me it wouldn't last if I waited, and I didn't want to lose him. I really love him. I swear I love him. I still love him right now. I really love Antoine. That's why I did it. That's why I love him do it.
Meanwhile, in the other room, Antoine was not confessing. He was still saying, "I don't know what you're talking about."
Linda and Antoine are both charged with first-degree murder. And when Antoine learns that his girl turned on him, and he's facing the death penalty, he decides to make his own deal.
Antoine admitted that he played a role in killing Isabel, but Antoine said that it was in fact Linda who was the mastermind of the murder, and that he was simply following the wishes of his loved one.
So they were both pointing fingers at each other. I guess love wasn't that strong.
Antoine Wright pleads guilty to second-degree murder and conspiracy. He agrees to testify against Linda and is sentenced to 20 years in prison. His girlfriend follows suit when she's told the state plans on prosecuting her as an adult. Linda Pedroza pleads guilty to second-degree murder, conspiracy, and falsely reporting a crime.
Because the state attorney's position was that Linda was most culpable for the murder of Isabel, she is actually sentenced to 40 years in prison.
That was her mom. She also tried to cover it up and lie to investigators about the situation.
Now, Linda has nothing but time to think about the damage she's done to her life, all thanks to the hold Antoine had over her.
¿Y esto qué fue, hola? Pues por lo que veo todos, Kevin.
After years of struggling with addiction, 𝕊𝕤𝕤𝕝𝕝 seeks sobriety and finds an intoxicating new love.
Their relationship was one that she never experienced before.
But when passion fades, 𝕊𝕤𝕤 is lured into a violent rock bottom that leaves Chicago's West Side reeling.
He pulled out the gun and he shot into the car, and they were on the run.
I just couldn't believe this. It was hard seeing my sister's face on news.
And later, in Lakewood, Washington, store manager 𝕊𝕤𝕤𝕝 Williams-Irby looks for a man who will bring some excitement into her life.
It was a perfect case of opposites attract.
And when her new love wants to steal more than her heart, 𝕊𝕤𝕤𝕝 will do whatever it takes to please him.
Hundreds of thousands of dollars were in play.
Customers are terrified, and 𝕊𝕤𝕤𝕝 is acting like she doesn't know anything about this.
There are hundreds of thousands of women in prison at any given time in the U.S. These are the true stories of women who committed heinous crimes in the name of love. For my man. 𝕊𝕤𝕤𝕝𝕝 and her sisters have a happy childhood, growing up in the Humboldt Park neighborhood of Chicago.
It was a really nice neighborhood. Me and my sisters, we would go to the park and have fun. It was very nice growing up.
But visits to the park are secondary for 𝕊𝕤𝕤, who was raised in a deeply religious household.
5 minutes and we need to go. We would go to church mostly every day of the week. She loved singing. She stood out in a choir. She was the lead singer. She had a lot going for herself. She was a very positive person growing up.
The high-spirited church girl shines amongst her peers.
She was friends with everybody. She was just the life of the party. She had a bright future. She's very smart. She taught me a whole lot.
However, as 𝕊𝕤𝕤𝕝 grows older, the fun-loving teen begins to find church life restrictive.
She was very outspoken. She wanted to be like her other friends, you know, outside of the church, you know. She wanted to just have fun.
Like many children that grow up in the church, 𝕊𝕤𝕤𝕝 rebelled. She started hanging out with the wrong crowd. Then she got involved in alcohol, which of course led to drugs.
The popular teen could now be found just about anywhere, except within the walls of worship.
She would hang out and be gone with her friends, and I would have to go and look for her.
Adolescent rebellion is quite normal. And so it's this constant pushing of the boundaries. And that pushing of the boundaries leads to very dangerous behaviors. And those dangerous behaviors then end up being chronic dangerous behaviors.
What starts as recreational drug use soon becomes an all-consuming habit when 𝕊𝕤𝕤𝕝 becomes hooked on heroin. To support her dangerous addiction, 𝕊𝕤𝕤𝕝 shoplifts from trendy clothing stores at the local mall.
She developed a reputation as a booster, selling the clothes that she stole, and she was successful at it.
It made her pretty popular in the community, but it also made her pretty popular with police.
She did what she needed to do to support that habit, and it got her locked up a few times.
And through all of her brushes with the law, her closest sibling still has her back.
Anytime my sister needed anything, help, I was there for her. You know, I was like, we're gonna do this, we're gonna make it, we're gonna get through this.
So finally, in her early 20s, after several years of disappointing her family and herself, 𝕊𝕤𝕤𝕝 makes the decision to enter into drug rehab.
𝕊𝕤𝕤𝕝 committed herself to getting better, getting clean, staying that way. Things were looking good.
I was very happy for her. Deep down inside, I know she wanted to, you know, do what was right.
Then one day, during a group therapy meeting, 𝕊𝕤𝕤𝕝 catches the eye of a handsome fellow patient, 39-year-old Dion Banks.
Dion Banks was this tall, good-looking guy. She immediately was drawn to him.
She wanted to get to know him better, so she introduced herself to Dion.
The two begin talking after meetings and develop an intimate rapport. They build a relationship on a foundation of friendship and honesty.
he had trouble with the law, trouble with gangs, and that he was in prison for murder.
Most women would have run away from a situation like this. But what happens in many situations when we're talking about drug abuse treatment, it's about not making value judgments, and it really is about redemption and forgiveness.
Shekinah and Dion's budding relationship seems more stable and intimate than anything she's felt before. But the two will have to wait before they can express their feelings physically.
When we look at drug abuse treatment, it is very frowned upon for the patient or the person going through the rehabilitation to engage in romantic liaisons because it's really easy for that drug dependency behavior to now be transferred to a codependency behavior in a sexual or loving relationship with someone else.
Dion and Shekinah tried hard to abide by the rules, and they grew even stronger.
When I met him, he was a okay guy, but I just felt like he was older than her. He was too old for her at the time. I kind of felt like something was wrong with him. I just didn't feel like that was the right person for her.
And when they're each released, Shekinah is sober and feeling on top of the world, ready to face the streets of Chicago and remain drug-free with her man.
She continued her relationship with Dion, and things were going well. They both supported each other in their sobriety.
Now out of the strict confines of treatment, they let the sparks fly.
They were finally able to have that physical contact that they weren't able to have during rehab.
But as time passes, the couple finds themselves falling off the wagon.
Dion began drinking again, which ultimately led to Shekinah falling back into her old habits of using drugs.
Dion relapsed, Shekinah relapsed, and all hell pretty much broke loose.
And in no time, the gentle, supportive Dion that Shekinah met in rehab has transformed into a monster.
Dion, being back on drugs and alcohol, would take that anger out on Shekinah.
After a few months, the pair is using drugs full-time and crashing on friends' couches. Shekinah uses her 5-finger discount to keep the couple afloat.
She did the shoplifting, which she was known to do well. She had to support herself and support her man. And Dion didn't want to have it any other way.
But no one could predict how this rocky relationship is about to spin out of control and collide into heartbreaking tragedy.
She thought she had something good, and it turned out to be the worst thing ever.
It was very devastating.
Chicago junkies Shekinah Feazell and her boyfriend Dion Banks are on a bender in need of cash, and no one is safe from this toxic twosome.
Shekinah went back to her old ways of stealing things to support her habit and to support her man's habit.
But soon the couple's thirst for drugs will have no boundaries. March 23rd unfolds in the usual way for the couple.
Shekinah and Dion had spent the night at a friend's home. The next day, they woke up and Dion tells Shekinah, "Get up, we're going to the mall."
Get up.
Shekinah knows that any trip to the mall means she'll have to ply her illicit trade.
So she thought, I need to get on my job and go shoplift so we can sell some things. It's time for us to, get high.
It's quite possible that Shekinah may have engaged in shoplifting again simply to get the money to be able to get the next fix. And as I see with many people who are drug addicted, to avoid the painful withdrawal from being drug addicted.
At approximately 2 p.m., Shekinah and Dion arrive at their destination.
Ford City Mall on the southwest side of Chicago. It's always crowded. They've got great stores, and it has the movie theater that's next to it on the property. So it's very popular.
It's then that Dion tells his leading lady they're going to mix it up.
I'm thinking it was a change of plan. I don't know exactly what happened. They were going to shoplift in one of the stores in the mall, but he decided to carjack someone.
𝕊𝕠𝕤𝕝𝕝 probably felt a little relief because they were going to use that money from the car to fund their habit.
After driving around the parking lot for a few minutes, Dion spots his target.
That's it. That's what I was.
Dion saw the perfect car that he wanted.
Stop the damn car.
Oh my gosh, what the
𝕊𝕠𝕤
hell?
watches as her man pulls a gun from his waistband and marches toward the car.
He approaches the car. There's a woman inside. So he's screaming at her, cursing at her, "Get the F out the car."
Get out the car! You hear me?
She's not moving fast enough, and Dion just snaps.
Dion shoots through the window, shooting the lady in her thigh. Dion then drags her out of the car, gets in the car, and pulls off.
He just leaves her on the ground.
My sister was in shock. She didn't know that this was going to take place.
As the armed hood takes off towards 𝕊𝕠𝕤 in the stolen vehicle, he's shocked to see two frightened boys sitting in the back seat. The woman Dion had just shot was their mother.
They seen all this happen. I can't even imagine what they were thinking at that time. It had to be very devastating for these kids.
It takes just a split second for him to make his move.
Get up!
Dion stops, lets the two little boys out, and then proceeds to leave in the stolen car.
𝕊𝕠𝕤 was more afraid than she had ever been. She didn't know what to do, but she knew that she had to quickly get in gear and follow Dion.
The two waste no time speeding away from the scene. Back in the Ford City Mall parking lot, the two little boys race to their injured mother's side.
Bystanders that were at the mall saw exactly what happened. The two little boys, of course, are around their mom, consoling her.
Onlookers called for an ambulance. The boys crowded their mother, clinging onto her, and she was rushed to the hospital.
Beloved 40-year-old mother of two, Rose Newburn, has lost a lot of blood and is hanging on to life by a thread. Her children are examined, and while traumatized, the 4- and 5-year-olds are now safe from harm. With the dangerous duo now long gone from the scene, police begin their investigation.
Witnesses tell them what type of car was stolen, and police put out a be on the lookout alert.
Across town, 𝕊𝕠𝕤 remains closely behind Dion as he speeds erratically through the streets of Chicago.
My sister was afraid. I feel like she was threatened. She knew that he had a gun.
𝕊𝕠𝕤's heart was pounding at this point.
And the mayhem has only just begun. And later, in Lakewood, Washington, Toni Marie Williams Irby throws caution to the wind to live dangerously with her lover.
There was an excitement, just the idea of maybe doing something illicit.
She looked out onto a sea of panicked and bloody customers.
In Chicago, Illinois, after witnessing her boyfriend shooting and carjacking a young mother, 𝕊𝕠𝕤 shadows her man as they continue to race down the shady path that's unfolding in front of them.
Why, in this situation, would you follow someone who committed a violent act? Perhaps the male in this situation is extremely violent, and the female realizes that she might be a victim of that herself if she doesn't cooperate. And secondly, the payoff for both of them, if they got away with this, would be to get their necks fixed.
The crooked couple drives on the expressway before exiting approximately 45 minutes later. Once alone, 𝕊𝕠𝕤 attempts to talk to Dion and figure out their next steps. How they can turn the car into cash to score drugs without getting caught.
𝕊𝕠𝕤 is trying to calm Dion down, trying to calm this monster down.
But any semblance of the man she loves is gone.
Dion was enraged.
Dion suggested that they unload that car, so he instructed 𝕊𝕠𝕤 to take him to a chop shop.
𝕊𝕠𝕤 tries reasoning with him.
I'll kill you! I'll kill you and I'll kill me!
Finally, this seems to work, and she gets an idea.
𝕊𝕠𝕤 says, okay, I know of a chop shop, but she didn't know of a chop shop.
After driving around looking for this fictitious garage that will buy their stolen wheels, 𝕊𝕬𝕝 has a plan to ditch Dion.
As they're going along, large park, heavily populated area, middle of the day.
She speeds up, hits 2 parked cars. She hits one so hard that her airbag deploys. She gets out, pretending to be injured.
𝕊𝕬𝕝 crawls out of the car and onto the pavement, pretending to be injured.
Dion comes over to find out what's going on.
He tells the small crowd that surrounds them that he'll take care of her.
𝕊𝕬𝕝 screaming, no, no, no. Dion picked her up anyway, put her in the car, and off they went.
Dion ends up gaining control once again with 𝕊𝕬𝕝. She's very fearful at this point for her safety, for her life.
I believe my sister was in shock.
As the couple makes their exit in the stolen Intrepid, 𝕊𝕬𝕝 pleads with Dion not to hurt her.
𝕊𝕬𝕝 tried to wrestle the gun out of Dion's hands.
Meanwhile, the couple's trail of mayhem has finally triggered the attention of law enforcement, who are already on the lookout for the stolen vehicle.
A cop pulled up next to them. Dion saw the car, he hit the gas and sped off. Lost control, hit a pillar, got out the car and ran.
𝕊𝕬𝕝 stayed there. At this point, it's over for her. She just wants this to be over. She's taken into custody. Dion is captured a short time later after a foot pursuit.
When the couple is brought to the police station, they are told that the owner of the Intrepid, Rose 𝕊𝕤𝕤, died hours earlier, bleeding out from the gunshot wound in her thigh, inflicted by Dion. 𝕊𝕬𝕝 Feazell faces multiple charges, including first-degree murder, aggravated vehicular hijacking, and possession of a stolen vehicle. Dion Banks faces the same charges. At trial, Dion is convicted of 5 counts of first-degree murder and aggravated discharge of a firearm. He is sentenced to death. 𝕊𝕬𝕝 is found guilty of first-degree murder and armed vehicular hijacking. After successfully appealing her case, her sentence is reduced to 27 years. Several years later, the governor abolishes the death penalty in the state of Illinois. Dion Banks is now serving a life sentence without the possibility of parole. The choice 𝕊𝕬𝕝 made to prioritize her man over her sobriety has led her to a life behind bars.
I believe she was a victim of domestic violence and at times was very afraid for her life from what we know. But secondly, that she was addicted to drugs and therefore had a lot of the emotional challenges that come with drug abuse and drug dependence, and someone who enables you and helps you to get the drugs.
Away from her sister and the rest of her family, she now regrets ever meeting the once gentle and charming Dion Banks.
𝕊𝕬𝕝 had everything going for her. Loving family, church background, but she became under the thumb of an abusive, controlling, much older man that she lost herself. She threw her entire life away for her man.
I really think that she thought it was more of love than what it turned out to be.
𝕊𝕬𝕝 Feazell's hope for true love crashed and burned when she fell under the spell of a man who fed into her addiction. Next, Toni Marie Williams-Irby starts a destructive chain of events when she falls in love with a charismatic crook. Originally from Chicago, Illinois, Toni Marie Williams-Irby has lived a stable and commonplace existence for most of her years.
She was a normal, average, middle-aged woman who was doing the best she could to take care of her kids. She might not have been a person that would have stood out into the crowd, but when she did herself up, she was attractive and even beautiful.
She worked in retail in the Chicago area and was a divorced mother of 2.
She was very dependable, but as a lot of women in their mid to late 30s, she probably wanted some excitement.
Trying to be that superwoman, the person who's a hands-on mom, who's a working woman, who's responsible for the whole family. It can be so stressful that it can really put you at risk for having a midlife crisis even before you hit midlife.
Likely yearning for more, the squeaky clean mom begins to question her consistent approach to walk the straight and narrow path. And as she approaches the big 4-0, she finds a man to do just that, single father Odious Walker.
Odious had a criminal history, and he had gang ties.
It was a perfect case of opposites attract.
He had a little swagger. Tony liked his bad boy style.
Yet despite the pair's obvious differences, the two share similar values.
They were single parents, and they shared a commitment to providing for their children the best that they could.
The juxtaposition between his bad boy style and being a family man kind of just mirrored the two together.
The happy lovebirds soon find themselves spending nearly all of their time together.
With Tony Marie and Odious, things developed and matured rather quickly. She fell in love with this bad boy, and she was really looking forward to building that stable family with Odious.
Tony Marie finally finds herself dating someone who doesn't always play by the rules. But little does she know, her eagerness to walk on the wild side will come at a heavy cost.
Their fantasies, their plans took a dark turn.
Tony was willing to risk it all for her man.
Chicago native Tony Marie Williams Irby is happy to have found an exciting new man, Odious Walker. What begins as a hot and heavy romance glides into more serious territory within a year.
Their relationship became very, very close. Their children were coming together. Everything seemed like it was going well for them.
The couple packs up their 5 children and heads to Washington State, where they lovingly begin their happily ever after.
They packed up and headed to Washington, where Odious had a few relatives.
In a place like Chicago, it's really difficult for a former gang member or a gang banger to turn a new leaf, to start a new lifestyle. Going to Washington State was a place that they truly hoped that they could start a new life.
The newly blended family settles in a posh town just outside of Tacoma.
University Place has always been considered a little oasis.
This is an area where people want to build their families. The crime rate's low. You don't hear on the news about all kinds of murders and shootings and robberies happening.
Tony quickly secures a well-paying management position at a big box retailer in the nearby town of Lakewood.
She was a merchandise supervisor, and she managed a small team.
She had good experience. She was trusted. She was respected.
It's a multifaceted job that requires Tony to be aware of all aspects of the store's operations.
She attended meetings. She was privy to the financial workings of the store.
While Tony is out earning a steady income, Odious is a stay-at-home dad.
Odious had been injured, but he really had the job of managing things at home while Tony went out and was actually in the labor force and was the breadwinner, so to speak.
It's an arrangement that works well for the couple and their family.
Tony and Odious probably thought that it was very important for someone to remain home with the children so that they had a loving environment.
In the middle of a move, it's really important that we look at the needs of the blended family because they are used to a certain lifestyle, they're used to their family being a certain way, so now we're pulling them, sometimes ripping them out of the comfort zone. It's important that we set the rules in a way so that this new blended family can coexist in a peaceful manner.
From the outside looking in, Tony and Odious are settling in well to their new suburban life together.
They were able to provide for themselves and their family pretty well. They could buy their children the latest toys and gadgets and also have money left over to go out to dinner every once in a while.
Tony and Odious loved to entertain. They loved barbecues. They loved to do it up big. If they were going to cook, they were going to have steaks or lobster or something nice.
But the pressures of living well soon begin to take their toll on the family.
The lifestyle that they live and the money that Tony is making simply is not working.
For Odious, that meant dreaming up ways that maybe he could bring in some more money.
Due to his disability, Odious is left with few options for legitimate employment, so he taps into his bad boy past.
Marijuana sales became Odious's way of making ends meet.
He keeps his operation small, quiet, and his lady love uninvolved.
Odious wasn't a big-time drug dealer. He was just bringing in a pound or two from California and selling it in dime bags from their home. So it really was not bringing in that much money.
When one member of a couple engages in illicit or illegal behavior, it kind of forces the other partner to kind of go down that slippery slope with them. And we have to be aware that if the partner who is not doing anything wrong, but is aware of their partner doing something wrong, in many ways, they are an accomplice to that bad behavior.
With marijuana sales not bringing in enough green, the couple knows they'll need to find another way to support their lavish lifestyle, which is when Tony shares some tantalizing information with her beloved.
I got an idea.
She decided that she was going to fill in Odious about the confidential information relative to the financial situation over at the store.
Tony began to tell Odious details of the store's day-to-day operations. I mean, serious details. And she could probably see those dollar signs in Odious's eyes.
$200,000 came in and out of the store every day. Imagine what they could do with that money. Imagine what they could do for their family.
Together they started fantasizing, and then at some point the fantasy crossed over into real life, where they began to actually start planning a heist.
Tony started to divulge details about the armored car, how much money was involved, when would the armored car get there, when was it expected to leave, how many guards were involved in the whole process.
But money is likely only a portion of the illicit allure for the once squeaky clean mom.
It sounds like she did feel excited to be a part of this world that Odious had been a part of. Cops and robbers and money and adventure.
For a woman who's led her life and gone down the straight and narrow, never engaged in a criminal act or criminal behavior before, to now be aware that the person that you're involved with is living that kind of a life, it can be some sort of an adrenaline rush.
Over the course of a month, Tony and Odious spend their evenings devising a plan to rob the megastore.
Her job was to provide the initial intelligence, and then her job was to be quiet, stay in the background, do her job as normal.
It was up to Odious to carry out that plan and make sure that it worked.
But it's a job that's much too large for ambitious Odious to execute alone.
They were trying to get hundreds of thousands of dollars away from trained specialists in the armored car industry. So Odious enlisted the help of his 31-year-old cousin, Calvin Finley, and family friend, 20-year-old Marshawn Turpin.
We don't know that much about Turpin's history, but Calvin Finley had a long criminal history.
When the burgeoning Bonnie and Clyde promised the two men each a generous cut from the heist, they seem more than eager to help.
Tony provided the team with all of the details that they needed. So what was next was just to get down to the nuts and bolts to essentially tie everything in so that they can enact their plan.
But no one could predict the tragic events that would soon unfold.
They wanted to do a heist. They wanted to get a lot of money. I don't think she planned to have somebody be killed.
As summer approaches, the newly minted team of thieves set their sights on a target date for the heist they're planning at the retail store where Tony Marie Williams-Erdby works in Lakewood, Washington.
Days before they were set to actually execute the heist, Odious, Calvin, and Marshawn decided to scope out the store.
The crew needed to know details of how the driver and the guard who carried the money bags worked together.
They drove to the retailer in Lakewood. They observed the armored car delivery and pickup. They decided who was going in and how it was going to be handled. They had it timed and planned down to the minute.
On a sunny June day, 38-year-old armored truck security guard 𝕬𝕤𝕤𝕤 goes about his daily routine. The popular retailer is one of many daily stops on his route.
He was very well loved. He was an outdoors person, he was a motorcycle enthusiast, and he was just on the verge of marrying his fiancée.
Kurt spent the past 16 years of his life working as an armored truck security guard. He was generally regarded by his fellow employees as someone who was dependable and someone they could trust.
At around 1:15 p.m., Odious, Calvin, and Marchand begin to make good on the plan. Tony has already been on the clock for a few hours and tries to remain calm. She knows that soon the Clyde to her Bonnie will arrive, forever changing both of their lives.
This was the day her man was going to show up at that store, and she was going to have her hands on more money probably than she had ever seen at one time in her life.
She probably was filled with anxiety, but she was doing her best to just have an even keel that day.
Outside, Odious and his crew get into position.
That means they're in the parking lot, in their vehicle, and they're waiting.
The store was pretty busy.
June in Washington is one of the loveliest months very often. It's the beginning of summer. People are usually buying little kiddie pools, looking for bathing suits, planning barbecues, thinking about weddings. You know, you don't imagine it as the time for an armed robbery.
Like clockwork, at 1:30 p.m., the armored truck arrives near the front entrance of the store.
Odious pulled up and parked right behind it. Then Marchand and Calvin got out and went into the store.
Due to the fact that it was a low-in-crime area, Kurt simply wore a bulletproof vest while he went into the store and his partner stayed in the armored truck.
Odious told Calvin he wants to be apprised of everything, so he's asked Calvin to call him on the cell phone and keep the line open, which is what Calvin has done.
Marchand and Calvin locate Kurt on his way to exit the store, and that's when they decide that they're going to get this done.
All this busyness that was going on in the store, Calvin approached armored truck guard 𝕬𝕤𝕤𝕤𝕤.
Excuse me, sir.
As Kurt turned to find the source of that voice, Calvin raised his right arm, extended it, firing one shot. Kurt was shot at point-blank range. He collapsed instantly.
As Kurt lies motionless in a pool of his own blood, he isn't Calvin's only casualty.
The trajectory of the bullet then went from Kurt's head into the shoulder of an individual who was just standing in line waiting to check out.
Andre Ramos was holding his 18-month-old son at the time.
As the murderous three make their getaway, the stunned and panicked customers and employees are trying to make sense of the violence they've stumbled into.
The store was pretty busy.
Customers are huddled, running. They are hiding under racks of clothing, and they don't know what's going on. They're terrified.
Tony Marie Williams-Irby hears the commotion caused by her man's crew while enacting their plan to commit a violent armed robbery. She watches as Calvin and Marchand escape the chaotic scene with bags of money.
Odious already had the car in motion. It was rolling when the last person got out of that door. People at the scene could hear the sirens as the first responders began to arrive on the scene.
Customer Andre Ramos is rushed to the hospital.
Thankfully, after being checked, he was okay, but he would have to live with a bullet in his arm for years to come.
His 18-month-old son, who was in his arms at the time, was checked out and found to be unhurt.
Lakewood police begin their investigation amidst the utter chaos of the scene.
Police began processing the scene and interviewing witnesses. They wanted to hear from anyone who was nearby when that shot was fired.
None of the witnesses or customers could provide an identity to the individuals who had committed the crime. And Tony did what she could to just remain anonymous.
Tony Marie works her shift just as if everything were normal. She does exactly what the plan called for her to do.
It's really interesting that Tony Marie was able to still go to work, maintain some sort of a calm demeanor, even after the heist, which she had direct responsibility for.
As she punches out for the day, Tony has only one thing on her mind.
Tony received a ride home from her friend, and she's passionately reunited with Odious.
Next, the lovers turned masterminds focus their attention on the spoils from their cruise take.
Tony and Odious headed out to meet Calvin and Marshawn to figure out how they were going to divide up their loot. They had pulled in together $40,000, and they had to find a way to divide it up amongst themselves.
While not as much as they had hoped for, $20,000 is still quite a windfall for the couple, so they decide to celebrate.
They were not suffering a lot of remorse. 38-year-old Kurt lay dead in the storefront. They still considered it enough of a success to put on their good shoes and go out shopping.
They bought a new video game system, games, a digital camera, and they went out to a big dinner.
While Tony and Odious party it up, investigators hone in on the surveillance cameras located throughout the store.
When police reviewed the surveillance footage, they were able to see every single detail of this violent crime. Calvin and Marshawn had not bothered to cover their faces, and there were vivid and clear images of their likenesses on that footage.
Once police had an image of Calvin Finley, the shooter, they were able to take it to other officers who identified him fairly quickly because he was sort of well-known criminal in the area.
Not ready to tip their hand, they locate and speak to one of Calvin's known associates, Roger Felton, to confirm Calvin's identity.
Roger not only identified Calvin, but told police that Odious and Tony Marie had approached him previously and asked him to be part of this criminal enterprise.
Be part of some type of scheme.
Roger stuns the officers when he reveals that the armed robbery's location wasn't chosen at random. It was an inside job.
Tony Marie Williams Irby was soon identified as a suspect and brought into custody.
Armed with a search warrant, police go to Tony and Odious's University Place apartment, and there they find a safe, $20,000 in cash, and a semi-automatic weapon.
At 9:15 p.m., police conduct a felony stop on Odious. Upon arrest, he's found with $322 in cash and some loose change. The following morning, police arrest accomplice and shooter Calvin Finley. Caught red-handed, he sings like a canary.
Calvin directed police to the apartment where Marshawn Turpin had been staying. Hours later, they made the arrest. Marshawn initially denied having anything to do with this robbery homicide, that is, until he learned that everybody else had been arrested.
Calvin Finley pleads guilty to first-degree murder, first-degree assault, and first-degree robbery. He is sentenced to life without parole. Marshawn Turpin pleads guilty to charges of first-degree murder, first-degree assault, second-degree assault, and conspiracy to commit first-degree robbery. He is sentenced to 47 years in prison. For his part, Odious Walker is convicted of multiple charges, including first-degree murder, first-degree assault, and first-degree robbery. He's sentenced to life in prison without parole. Tony Marie Williams Irby is charged with first-degree murder, first-degree robbery, and conspiracy to commit first-degree robbery. She'll have to make a difficult decision if she has any hope of spending less time behind bars.
Tony initially pled not guilty. However, after realizing the charges that she had against her, she decided it would be in her best interest to testify against her man, Odious. As a result of her cooperation with the DA's office, she had her charges dropped from 6 to 2, and she was sentenced to 20 years.
Tony pleads guilty to first-degree murder and first-degree robbery.
A lot of people live in this magical world where they actually think they're gonna hit lotto. So they sit back and they wait for their numbers to come up. In many ways, Tony Marie kind of did the same thing, but in fact, this thing was so out of control that the only thing that she ended up with wasn't the loot, but actual blood on her hands.
Bonnie and Clyde syndrome, perfect description when you look at this case. It seems like Tony kind of got off, if you will, on the idea that she would mention some details and then her man would somehow put together a plan and make this whole fantasy come to fruition.
If you believe in any kind of redemption at all, what you always want to hear is people really feel sorry, really understand the magnitude of their wrongdoing and feel remorse for it. And does she? I don't know.